I understand that due to the close relationship with Pete and Salim ul-Haq, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Bangladesh, and the least developed countries would like to pay tributes. I give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I first want to offer condolences on behalf of the UK to the government of Bangladesh for the passing of Salim and to all of his family and friends. Salim was a good friend to the UK, a critical friend when we needed it, and he fought tirelessly for action on loss and damage, and I hope we're able to honour him with a fitting outcome from this COP. Sadly, the world has lost two climate advocates. Pete Betts died on October the 21st following a battle with cancer, and he was laid to rest yesterday in London. He was a giant in our process, and for me, like many in the UK team, he was my biggest inspiration and my toughest critic. Pete never stopped advocating for climate action. He never stopped believing in multilateralism and the capacity for change. He took the outcome in Copenhagen hard, and he felt we didn't try hard enough to bridge the divides, and he worked relentlessly to rectify that in Paris, playing a big role in securing that agreement. And one of the things that made Pete stand out was that he operated on a very human level. He had strong views, and he expressed them clearly, but he also listened to others. He challenged his own assumptions, and if he didn't understand why someone held a position, he asked relentless questions until he did, and usually with an inappropriate joke for good measure. He pushed the UK as hard as he pushed anyone else, and he always wanted to advocate for the most vulnerable. Because above all, Pete believed that in this fight against climate change, there is no us and them. We win together or we lose together, and I hope we can carry that spirit into this COP. Pete has been the heart and soul of the UK team for many years, and we will carry his values with us. But his impact was so much wider. Pete often said that his biggest achievement was founding the Cartagena Dialogue, which is a group of negotiators from the developed and developing world who come together to understand positions and advocate for action. Negotiators from the Cartagena Dialogue have made a statement to remember Pete and to reflect on the need for togetherness at COP28, which we'll send to the Secretariat and others will speak to. Finally, Pete was proud, he was extremely proud to be an EU lead negotiator and to speak on behalf of so many countries. And he held the EU team incredibly close to his heart, even after the UK had left. So I'd like to pass over to our friends in the European Union to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the European Union, to Spain on behalf of the European Union.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and colleagues. On behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states, and on behalf of the hundreds of Pete's colleagues who worked with him as part of Team EU, we would like to join the United Kingdom in marking his passing, as well as Salim's passing, with gratitude, respect, and sadness. Thank you for providing this moment for us to reflect on his passing and on Salim's.
I thank you. I give the floor to Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity to speak about Professor Dr. Salim ul-Haq. He was an outstanding and very well-spoken gentleman, loved by all. And he was an academician, you know. He worked for the University of Independent University of Bangladesh, and he established one department to study tertiary level education for environment and climate change, and establish one center dedicatedly for climate change. And we are very happy and proud that he was a Bangladeshi. His voice was not only for Bangladesh, it's for vulnerable of the planet. And especially, we would recall that his contribution in the climate change movement to establish the loss and damage concept and the fund. Our greatest tribute and gratitude to the presidency for organizing this dedicated event for him. Thank you so much.
I thank you. I give the floor to Senegal on behalf of the least developed countries. The delegation of Senegal. The delegation of Senegal seems not to have arrived yet, so we will proceed. I will now deliver my final comments as COP President. Your Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, Your Excellency Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, COP President-designate, let me at the outset express my sincere thanks and gratitude for the support I received from all of you in performing my duties as COP President, be it during the build-up for COP27, at the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, or throughout the year that ensued. As parties, observers, stakeholders, and civil society, as well as the UNFCCC Secretariat, your help and support was invaluable. As you all know, COP27 convened at a difficult time in the midst of a challenging international context, as the world continued to recover from the impacts of COVID-19, as well as face the compound ramifications of the war in Ukraine. Nevertheless, COP27 turned out as yet another moment where our commitment to a greater cause prevailed, a landmark in our collective progress to ensure inclusive and effective global climate action. Building on previous COPs, COP27 succeeded in delivering a number of much-needed and long-awaited elements to the global climate agenda. Together for Implementation was not just a slogan at COP27, but rather a timely call to move from setting rules, frameworks, and commitments to a clear focus on the tangible implementation of these commitments on the ground. A call which we heeded together by establishing the loss and damage funding arrangements, including the fund, launching the Just Transition Work Program, and agreeing on the Mitigation Work Program. We showcased an unwavering commitment to enhancing global climate action during this critical decade. By voicing a resounding call for the reform of international financial institutions, highlighting renewable energy as a pathway for the future, championing the adaptation agenda through the work of the Marrakesh Partnership, and agreeing on unprecedented outcomes on water, oceans, and forests, we at COP27 ushered in a new age of implementation in our relentless fight against climate change. Colleagues, as we highlight the achievements of COP27, we also need a frank assessment of where we stand in relation to our collective ambitions, to the stark realities of science, and to the echoing voices of impacted communities across the globe. A quick realities check in this regard should be of concern to all of us for a number of reasons. First, because most of what we bring forward as tangible solutions and actionable commitments is based on speculation or well wishes at most. That we will be able to deliver our NDCs conditional and unconditional. That developed countries will deliver the 100 billion goal. That the loss and damage fund established in Sharm el-Sheikh will be replenished in billions of dollars. That international financial institutions will be reformed to deliver all the support required. And that the private sector, altogether with Article 2.1.c of the Paris Agreement, is the silver bullet that will unlock the flows of appropriate finance to developing countries. These are all mere assumptions with no evident proof in reality. Second, rather than increasing climate finance from developed countries, actually, it's decreasing in relation to the growing needs and the increasing costs of finance in developing countries. The Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund are but two examples of this worrying trend of decreased financial flows. Third, the expansion of fossil fuel exploration and production, in particular of coal, in countries that previously committed to substantially phase down, or in some instances, completely phase out coal. Another worrying sign is the increased gap in renewable energy expansion and availability, and the temptation of resorting to unilateral measures, either through incentives or taxes, shifting fair competition and jeopardizing multilateralism and hard-earned gains in developing nations. Colleagues, these are all worrying signs that we need to take seriously, as they not only erode trust in the global climate regime, but also have deep impacts and severe consequences on our ability to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. And while the outcomes delivered in Sharm el-Sheikh do take us a step further in the right direction, these worrying signs need to be addressed immediately and effectively if we are to remain on the right side of history and to ensure that our collective efforts are not in vain. As I today perform my very last duty as COP President, and as Egypt hands over the baton of responsibility for global climate actions to the UAE, I am confident that addressing these challenges will be the focus of incoming President Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber and his able team, especially in the context of the global stocktake, as well as the energy and finance pathways of COP28. I trust that under his capable leadership, the global climate action agenda will progress even further, putting us a step closer to achieving our targets. Once again, I thank you, and I wish you all a very fruitful COP28. Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, I would like to invite you to turn to sub-item 2A of the provisional agenda for the session, entitled Election of the President of the Conference of the Parties at its 28th session. In accordance with Rule 22, Paragraph 1 of the Draft Rules of Procedure being applied, the office of the President of the Conference of the Parties is subject to rotation among the 5 regional groups. We now continue the cycle with a president from the Asia-Pacific states. It gives me great pleasure to propose that the conference elect by acclamation His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber, who will serve as president of the conference at its 28th session. I declare His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber elected President of the 28th session of the Conference of the Parties. I congratulate His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber on his election and wish him every success in guiding the work of the conference. I would now like to invite His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber to take his seat at the podium. Thank you, Simon, for everything. All the best.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم. مساكم الله بالخير.
Good morning, good afternoon to all. Welcome to the United Arab Emirates, the country of Zayed, the country of giving, the country of development and sustainability.
Excellencies, dear friends, colleagues, members of every delegation, it is an honor to be with you today. And I am so glad that this day has finally arrived. And as my first official act as COP President, allow me to express my gratitude to my very dear friend, Sameh Shukri. Your Excellency, you have led this conference with vision, purpose, and integrity. We are indebted to you for your service, your accomplishments, and your commitment to climate progress. And allow me to also extend my gratitude to every person in this room. We come from different nations, different backgrounds, and different generations. Yet, we share something vital. At some point in each of our lives, we all made a choice to help carry the burden of a great responsibility, to raise our hands and bear some portion of the weight on our shoulder. That choice is why we are all here in the United Arab Emirates today. The UAE is deeply proud and humbled to be hosting COP28 at a pivotal time in this critical decade for climate action. We know, as you know, the gravity of this moment. We feel, as you feel, the urgency of this work. And we see, as you see, that the world has reached a crossroads. And yes, since Paris, we have made some progress. But we also know that the road we have been on will not get us to our destination in time. The science has spoken. It has been loud and clear. It has confirmed that the moment is now to find a new road, a road wide enough for all of us, free of the obstacles and the detours of the past. That new road starts with a decision on the global stocktake, a decision that is ambitious, corrects course, and accelerates action to 2030. Through the global stocktake, we have a chance to unite the three core elements of the climate agenda. We can finally bring mitigation, adaptation, and means of implementation, which includes finance, under one umbrella, united around higher ambition, giving clear direction on nationally determined contributions, and connecting everything we agree here to practical action in the real world. Every nation, every sector, and every one of us has an urgent and an immediate role to play. For my part, I pledge that I will run an inclusive and transparent process, one that encourages free and open discussion between all parties. I ask you to start this COP with a different mindset. I ask you to adopt a different way of thinking. And I ask you to be flexible. We must ensure that this COP delivers the most ambitious global stocktake possible. So let's work efficiently. Let's agree on the agenda and move to text quickly. Please. We have no time to waste. Friends, I believe that the United Arab Emirates reflects the spirit we need at this COP. My country is only 2 years older than me. And that makes it a young country, in fact, a very young country. It is a nation that rose up from the desert through the vision and foresight of our late founding father, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, and the conviction and aspiration he passed on to the generations that followed. And now, 52 years later, just look around. We may be a young nation, but we have big ambitions and hold fast to principles like collaboration, optimism, true partnership, determination, and commitment. These are the ingredients that make up the DNA of the United Arab Emirates. And it's these core values of trust, purpose, partnership, and pragmatism that I believe must define the DNA of COP28. That means it is essential that no issue is left off the table. And yes, as I have been saying, we must look for ways and ensure the inclusion of the role of fossil fuels. I know there are strong views about the idea of including language on fossil fuels and renewables in the negotiated text. We collectively have the power to do something unprecedented. In fact, we have no choice but to go the very unconventional way. I ask you all to work together. Be flexible. Find common ground. Come forward with solutions and achieve consensus. And never lose sight of our North Star of 1.5. Because that is what I am going to stay laser focused on. Excellencies, dear friends, we all know that a key success factor across climate agenda is finance. And for too long, finance has not been available, accessible, or affordable. This presidency is committed to unlocking finance to ensure that the Global South does not have to choose between development and climate action. Let this be the year that climate finance meets the magnitude of the moment. Let this be the COP where we deliver on our promises from the 100 billion to loss and damage. And on loss and damage, I know how important this issue is to the parties, particularly to the most vulnerable. What began in Sharm el-Sheikh and what was given critical momentum and traction in Abu Dhabi earlier this month must now be delivered and actioned here in Dubai. And allow me here to pause for a moment to honor the memory of our distinguished colleague and my dear friend, Salim al-Haq. He devoted his entire career to the cause of finding a way to address loss and damage. And I personally benefited from his advice and his experience, particularly on the imperative to shift the world's focus to the needs of adaptation. Excellencies, adaptation must be at the heart of our action. We must bridge the finance gap and agree on a robust framework for the global goal. Let's put nature, lives, and livelihoods at the core of our national plans. Let's finally face the issues that are critical to adaptation, like water, food, agriculture, and health. And that is why I am proud that this COP will be the first to host a climate health ministerial. Colleagues, I want this COP to be the COP that maximizes momentum on mitigation. Today, countries representing more than 85% of the world's economy are behind COP28's goal of tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030. And we are reaching critical mass on the goal to double energy efficiency by 2030. This is how we will transition away from unabated coal. Let me also encourage countries to establish net zero methane emission targets as part of their next round of NDCs. Zeroing out methane emissions can make a huge impact in the shortest time frame. Colleagues, and let history reflect the fact that this is the presidency that made a bold choice to proactively engage with oil and gas companies. We had many hard discussions. Let me tell you, that wasn't easy. But today, many of these companies are committing to zero methane emissions by 2030 for the first time. And now, many national oil companies have adopted net zero 2050 targets for the first time. And I'm grateful that they have stepped up to join this game-changing journey. But I must say, it is not enough. And I know that they can do much more. They can lead the way. And them leading the way will ensure that others follow and catch up. At the same time, as part of this presidency's action agenda, we are engaging with other high-emitting sectors like heavy transportation, aluminum, steel, and cement, all in an effort to accelerate decarbonization at scale. I'm calling on all industries to engage, to innovate, to modernize, and invest in clean technologies. Colleagues, my friends, my partners, the next 2 weeks will not be easy. Let's remember, our task is not only about negotiating text or putting words on paper. It is about improving lives. It is about people. From the students I met in Bangladesh to the young entrepreneurs I saw in Nairobi, to indigenous communities I visited in the Amazon basin. All of us want and need the same things: clean air, clean water, healthy food, economies, and opportunities for ourselves and our families. And of course, we want a safe and a secure future. Is that too much to ask? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my friends and my partners, we all made a choice to be here at this time. We understand the gravity of the situation, and I know that we all respect the science. Today, we need to follow through. Take that new road, and let's bring everyone on board with us. If we want to accelerate progress across the climate agenda, we must apply a positive can-do vision to get a GST decision with the highest ambition. We must translate the negotiated outcomes into real results in the real world. And we must use the next 2 weeks wisely. Take a no-nonsense approach with no delays. Let's restore faith in multilateralism. Let's bring back the lost trust in multilateralism. And let's deliver some good news to the world that really needs it today. And friends, I'll be right there, at your side, every step of the way. I will roll up my own sleeves alongside you. Let's rise above our differences to make the difference for future generations. Right now, here in the United Arab Emirates, I'm calling you all to unite, to act, and to deliver. I thank you.
Distinguished delegates, honored guests, colleagues, we are pleased to have with us Professor Jem Skia, the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and Mr. Simon Steele, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary. It is my pleasure to invite Mr. Simon Steele to address the plenary. Simon, you have the floor.
Excellencies, delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank our Egyptian friends for their stewardship over this last year as they hand over this heavy responsibility to our Emirati colleagues. And let us be clear, this is a heavy responsibility. Colleagues, this process reminds me of watching my baby son, Joe, crawling across the sharp grasses of my parents' island home. He was an accomplished crawler and runner, but he barely spent any time on the baby steps in between. Today, we find ourselves in a rather different position in humanity's climate action journey. We are taking baby steps, stepping far too slowly from an unstable world that lacks resilience to working out the best responses to the complex impacts that we are facing. We must teach climate action to run, because this has been the hottest year ever in humanity. So many terrible records were broken, and we are paying the price with people's lives and livelihoods. We're standing at a precipice, facing the global stocktake. And we've got two options. Either we can note the lack of progress, tweaking our current best practices, and encourage ourselves to do more at some other point in time. Or we decide at what point we'll have made everyone on the planet safe and resilient. We decide to fund this transition properly, including the response to loss and damage. And we decide to commit to a new energy system. If we do not signal the terminal decline of the fossil fuel era as we know it, we welcome our own terminal decline. And we choose to pay with people's lives. If this transition isn't just, we won't transition at all. And that means justice within and between countries, sharing benefits across society, ensuring that everyone, women, indigenous peoples, and youth, in all their diversity, have equal opportunities to benefit from these transitions. Last year, I said we were going to do things differently. So let me lay out that vision and what's going to happen over the next 2 years. In 2024, countries will submit their first biennial transparency report. This will mean the reality of individual progress can't be concealed. We will also see at COP29 how to finance this massive shift with the new finance goal. And let this be your first official notice that early in 2025, countries must deliver new nationally determined contributions. Please start working on them now. This takes us to COP30, where every single commitment on finance, adaptation, and mitigation has to be in line with a 1.5-degree world. Science tells us we have around 6 years before we exhaust the planet's ability to cope with our emissions, before we blow through 1.5-degree limit. As a teenager, my son Joe had a wonderful phrase he would use when I asked him to do something. "I'm trying to try, Dad," he would say. Unfortunately, this does as much for delivering climate action as it does finishing your homework. It's simply not enough for us to be trying to try. And I'm not using my son as an example to suggest that it's his generation's responsibility to save us from the scourge we face. We are indebted to young people and to civil society for having pushed us this far. They're looking at us to take responsibility for speeding things up. So let's be transparent in the actions and the decisions that we take here with each other. And in that spirit, delivering on the promise I made on accountability, the UNFCCC has reformed the badging system. Every participant at this COP is already publicly listed. The whole world knows who's here. They will hold us to account on what we do or do not do. As Yoda would say, do or do not. There is no try. Yes, this is the biggest COP yet, but attending a COP does not tick the climate box for the year. The badges around your necks make you responsible for delivering climate action here and at home. To further ensure accountability, I'm committing the UNFCCC to tracking all announcements made and initiatives launched, so that long after the cameras have gone, we can ensure our promises continue to serve the planet. Dear delegates, the UNFCCC, as custodians of this process, is here as the impartial facilitator. Remember this: behind every line you work on, every word or comma you wrestle with here at COP, there is a human being, a family, a community that depends on you. Turn the badges around your necks into a badge of honor and a life jacket for the millions of people you are working for. Accelerate climate action. Teach it to run. I thank you. Shukran.
Thank you, Simon. I welcome Professor Jamskia and congratulate him on his election as the new chair of the IPCC. Professor Skia comes with extensive experience and expertise on climate science and will be leading the IPCC through its 7th assessment cycle. I invite Professor Skia to address the plenary. Professor Skia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honoured to address the opening of COP28 on behalf of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and we are thankful to the UEA government and the UNFCCC for their careful preparation of the conference and for their generous hospitality. IPCC's scientific assessments are ever clearer and more certain about climate change, its impacts and future risks, and options for adaptation and mitigation. Our planet has warmed by more than 1 degree Celsius since the pre-industrial era as the result of burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and the unsustainable use of resources. Human activity has led to changes in the Earth's climate of a magnitude that are unprecedented over centuries and thousands of years. Climate impacts, some of them irreversible, are widespread, rapid, and intensifying from the poles to the tropics and from the mountains to the oceans. And without immediate and deep emission reductions across all sectors, we will not meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The UNEP GAP report released a few days ago shows that we are headed towards global warming of 3 degrees Celsius if we carry on with our current policies. And let us not forget the gap in terms of adaptation and financing. But there are some promising signs of climate action. In some countries, there have been sustained emissions reductions, and these have helped to bend the rising trend in emissions globally. And in the past decade, there have been sustained decreases in the costs of renewable energy. Our assessments have identified multiple options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change. And these can be implemented right now, but they need to be scaled up and mainstreamed through policies and increased financing. Now, the IPCC is gearing up for its 7th assessment cycle, and in less than 2 months, our 195 member governments will take decisions on the programme of work for the rest of this decade of climate action. Our aspiration is to make effective use of the best available science to deliver focused, policy-relevant reports, and to do so in an inclusive fashion that represents all perspectives. As the chair of the IPCC, I can reassure you that the scientific community is poised, using the resources available to it, to support the outcomes of COP28 in shaping climate action based on science. But finally, let us recall, science by itself is no substitute for action. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Skia. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this brings us to the end of the opening ceremony of COP28. Delegates, please remain in your seats. We will continue with the first plenary meeting of COP28, followed by the first plenary meeting of CMP 18 and the first plenary meeting of CMA 5.